Good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. This is a planning board meeting. Welcome. We'll call to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. For that, I ask Vice Chairman Fisher to lead us in pledge.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Don. At this time, let's pause for a moment of reflection. Thank you, everyone. It's time to establish voting members as rules dictate. Since we have 5 board members present this evening, we will not require an alternate because that would put us to an even number of folks. So Mrs. Duda, feel free to comment on anything. You will not be allowed to make motions or to vote, but you can comment.
Thank you.
That being said, we have 5 voting members this evening. This time, I'd like to ask if there's any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening.
Mr. Chair, I make a recommendation we accept the agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Very good. Next item, approval of minutes. Please take a moment to review the minutes from the June 7th, 2022 meeting if you have not already. And once you've done so, if we could have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Very good, thank you. All right, moving along. The only agenda item that we have this evening is the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee recommendations. Before we get started, I'd like to say we have a bunch of material this evening that we need to cover. So out of respect for your fellow citizens and board members, we ask that you please keep everything as concise as possible or we will be here all night. That being said, let's get going.
Thank you and welcome everybody to our presentation of the Union County 2050 implementation recommendations. I would like to thank the board for allowing us to present today and all of the citizens who worked on the committees to make this plan a reality. So today we are here to present the implementation strategies for the county's new comprehensive plan. Just a little bit of background about the plan here. The comprehensive plan was adopted about a year ago, and it identified several issues that required developing new policies and ordinance language in order to meet the goals that were set forth by the plan. To develop these recommendations and ordinances, 6 committees were appointed by the Board of Commissioners to make the recommendations. The approval process for any recommendations that you're going to hear tonight goes as follows. These specific committees make recommendations based on whatever their particular prerogative was. The planning board will then evaluate and make its own recommendations, whether you choose to approve, modify or deny the recommendations made by these committees. And then the Board of Commissioners will approve, amend and approve, or deny the recommendations that come out of this board. And just a little bit about the timeline of the committee. For reference, we started meeting in January with just general introductions, establishing meeting schedules, establishing chair people for each of the committees. And then in February through April, the committees went through a process where they conducted research. We heard from subject matter experts in the field, from peer communities, from other members of our community to try and really flesh out solutions to help us meet the issues that were identified in the comp plan last year. And then in May through June, the committees met to finalize what recommendations they had. All recommendations that you are going to hear were made through a 2/3 vote. So anything coming out of these committees has at least 2/3 support from the committee members, if not more. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Chairman Josh Allen for the Stormwater Committee. I believe he is on go-to-meetings here.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman Allen.
All right. Good. I apologize for not being able to be there tonight. I'm actually in Idaho for work at the moment. But yes, so we met, and our general recommendations for from the comprehensive plan were to improve water quality and better manage stormwater runoff from new developments in order to help reduce flooding across the county. So I can't see the slides, but I'm going to speak from memory as best I can. But basically, all of our recommendations are on the slide in front of you. Some of the ones I'd like to highlight in terms of water quality, we recommended we adopt an optional incentive program so that existing devices that are either outdated or in poor condition can be retrofitted as water quality devices to help improve our county's water quality, and then adopting the Mecklenburg County Stormwater Design Manual that would help to establish a criteria for design criteria for all stormwater management facilities moving forward in order to help those be better designed in order to manage stormwater and treat stormwater in a more efficient manner. There were a couple things that, as a committee, we were not able to vote on. We ran out of time, but there are, and so I think the plan that Bjorn and I had is that we would we have essentially an informal approval from the committee for these remaining two things, but we would like to present these to the planning board. And get basically your buy-in one way or the other. And those two things that we were not able to vote on, one would be increasing the detention requirement throughout the county for new development. Currently, any new development is required to detain the 2-year and the 25-year storm event, and we would recommend that we increase that requirement to the 50-year. It's just going to, again, further require more detention on site for new development, and therefore help to reduce flooding in downstream areas. And then the second one would be a certain threshold for development size as to when these rules would trigger or be enforced. And you're going to have to help me remember that it's like isn't it? It's 1 acre of disturbance, isn't that right? Or a 1/4 acre of impervious? Is that correct?
Yes, that is exactly correct.
Okay, so yeah, so those would be our and there were things that were discussed as a committee. Again, we were just not able to vote on them with our time restrictions. So we would like to present those to you for your opinion and recommendations.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask board members if they have any questions for Chairman Allen.
Yeah, I got a couple questions, Chairman Allen. A couple questions I have. So, one, you're talking about, oh, I'm sorry.
I think you might go there.
So we're talking about the voted on limiting the clear cutting during development to keep streams and buffers. As a contractor, now we can go in and we can clear the perimeter, we clear the basin area, we stump the perimeter, we can stump the basin area, but we typically can't stump the remainder of the site until we have our erosion control measures in place. What are y'all implying in the limiting clear
Sure.
cutting and mass grading during the development?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's you're speaking in regards to erosion control, which is absolutely correct, and this is more of just clear cutting sites in general. So, but particularly with residential developments, when these sites are clear cut and mass graded, all the topsoil is stripped off, and the hydrology of the soil changes from where it was in its existing condition to that post-development condition. And so based on research that I've read, that these areas that are classified as open space after a residential development has been built, they don't really function as open spaces, because the earth under the layer of sod that was put down is so compacted, and there is no topsoil. It functions more like, not like a parking lot, but more like a parking lot than a grassed area. And so it would be that we would just require, from a calculation perspective, we would build in some conservativity into that. So they would be, they would have to assume that there's a little bit more runoff coming off of these open spaces than what is currently assumed.
Okay, so you're saying that it's not so much from a point of regulating and monitoring the respreading the topsoil across the site after the site's benched and balanced. You're just saying from a standpoint of, okay, we're just gonna go ahead from the get-go and just figure that that's compacted ground and it's gonna have a higher runoff.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So it'd be from a post-construction perspective that we'd be looking at that.
Okay. So how can we be a little more clear on limiting the clear cutting and mass grading during development to keep streams and buffers and contiguous forests from in protected open space area? Because that's kind of broad.
Are we looking perhaps for a number, like a certain amount of feet from the stream buffer, or a limit at the stream buffer where it remains undisturbed?
I believe the Open Space Committee, we were doing a lot of collaboration back and forth with the Open Space Committee, and I believe that they had set some criteria for that. But what we were looking at from that, just from that mass clearing perspective, was that, so this is getting a little into the weeds, I apologize, but all soils have a different type of hydrologic soil classification from A to D, and that kind of it is indicative of how well water infiltrates through the soil. So really tight clay soils are D soils, and then really sandy soils are A soils. So our thought was, if you mass grade a site for residential development and your in situ soils are, let's say, B or C soils, well, in your calculations, when you're trying to determine the amount of runoff coming off the site, you would actually assume conservatively that your soils are D soils. So and that would account for that additional runoff that coming off of these compacted areas. And it's just a way to help mitigate really the localized flooding that we see a lot in these residential areas. After the construction's been completed, after the developer pulls out, those localized areas in like people's backyards and that sort of thing. This is a way to help mitigate that, hopefully.
Okay. I mean, I feel like a lot of the flooding we see is because of, when we see more than 3 lots drain through a swell in a rear yard, rather than and picking that up in a catch basin and carrying it to be treated.
Yep.
In a
Yeah.
when we see 5 or 6 lots, or say you have 6 lots at 50 feet wide, and so that's 300 feet, and you've got all that runoff from the roofs, the downspouts, the driveways, all collected in that swell. I feel like that's where where you see more erosion, because it's not being designed in a way to pick up. Every third lot needs a catch basin, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that, and then by building in this level of conservatism would basically in that scenario you're describing, they're underestimating. We as engineers are underestimating the amount of runoff coming off those 5 or 6 lots. So
Okay.
by building in this extra level of caution or conservatism, then you're requiring that swale to be a little bit bigger, or you're requiring catch basins to be added, or what have you.
Are there any additional questions for Chairman Allen at this time?
I have one more. On the talking about the flooding, and we were talking about adopting the Charlotte Storm Water Design Manual, is that kind of pertaining more to the side of the Charlotte Stormwater where you have more sand filters, rain gardens, that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. So it's not necessarily dictating what type of structure should be put in. That's really still towards the developer and the engineer. But it's depending on what structure, what stormwater management facility they decide to put in there, it will dictate how that structure should be designed.
So are we gonna have to hire somebody within the county or a team within the county to inspect these, as Mecklenburg County does, inspect these on an annual basis to ensure that they're working properly? Because once that sand layer is silted over, they don't function, and then it increases your runoff because they're not draining properly.
We discussed that as a committee, and we decided that at this point in time that it wouldn't be financially viable to recommend something like that, like an inspection program or an annual certification program.
So we're gonna adopt you wanna adopt the Charlotte Stormwater Design Manual, but we don't have anybody really to enforce it.
That's correct. Because right now there is no design criteria at all. So a lot of people will go back to the state or just, I mean, they're designed based on experience. So we felt like adopting that design manual would kind of create a floor for how at least initially stormwater management facilities are designed and constructed within the county.
So we're still gonna kind of rely on the state to review plans and from a state level, more so than a county level?
I believe that they do go through, have to get a state permit, but I believe there is also a third-party engineer that does a review for the county as well.
Okay.
So I think with the Charlotte Stormwater Design, in my experience, you have the design component, and then you also have the maintenance component, which are two separate mechanisms. And I think
That's correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Chairman Allen, you're saying that we're looking only for the design component, not the maintenance component of that in the proposed plan you have here.
Yes, sir. In an ideal world, we would have an annual certification program that would make sure that these facilities that are being designed and constructed are being maintained the way they're supposed to be maintained and they're functioning correctly. But based on recommendations to the committee, it was deemed that it wasn't appropriate at this time.
Very good. Well, thank you, Chairman Allen, for your time. Safe travels out there at Idaho.
Thank you.
At this time,
Everybody take care. Have a good night.
This time, I'd like to invite discussion within the board itself, or see if we have any motions for adoption, denial, modification, along those lines. Just along, in my opinion, just to get the ball rolling, I will say that in the past few years, I've seen gosh, 5 years, I've seen at least 200-year flood events. It's real, and we are seeing it throughout the county. So I do feel that increased stormwater mitigation efforts are definitely necessary. I think that we're considerably further behind. I know Georgia, as a matter of fact, gosh, it was, I don't know, 15 years ago, they implemented some of the most stringent stormwater guidelines in the nation. And what it was is based on lakes. Lakes have a lifespan, and the lifespan is based on when they fill up with silt to the point where they're no longer viable. So they went from one of the least restricted to one of the most restricted. And I know we don't have major bodies of water, but we do have the flooding issue. So that in mind, those are my 2 cents.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Vice Chair.
I don't understand why we're going to adapt the Charlotte stormwater design and not have a staff to manage it and work on it. That's like kicking things down the road for the next 15, 20 years, or 5 years, whatever the case may be. I think if it's going to be in the plan and passed in the plan, there ought to be a program in there to be able to have somebody that's going to manage it and fix it and not let it get out of hand. I don't know how the rest of the group feels.
I agree. I think, like you said before, Jonathan, the design, but who's gonna maintain it? You know, it's great that we're gonna have a design, but what good is it if it's not being maintained?
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my concern too, is who's gonna keep it up. You know, there's a whole team in Charlotte, and we work with them every day, that enforce this Charlotte design manual, which I think there's a ton of flaws in. I work with it every day. I'm not crazy about a lot of things they do and a lot of things they demand, but I just, you know, I've seen a lot of stuff work, and I've seen a lot of stuff not work. So, I think for me, I'd like to see some clarity on adopting the plan and the limit clear cutting and mass grading. And I know I asked that question, but I think there needs to be some clarity on what that means, because it just is limiting clear cutting and mass grading during development, keeping streams and buffers. I understand, those are protected typically, those are protected. Buffers are, on every site you go on, there's a 50-foot buffer around a stream or whatever it comes up against. So, and I don't know, maybe that's some verbiage that kind of gets tweaked along the way, but.
I would agree with making the verbiage a little clearer as far as clear cutting. Stream buffers, in my experience, and Mr. McAteer, you let me know if you disagree, but typically there's just a number associated with that. Like 50 feet from the stream buffer, and it's clearly defined. So I don't know if that would be very difficult to remove the ambiguity to that condition before presenting it to the Board of County Commissioners.
Well, that's gonna be on a stream-by-stream basis, whether it's a wet weather ditch or whether it's 12 Mile Creek. You know, it's gonna be on a case-by-case basis, or whether it's a farm pond that you go in and you develop the land around it. You know, it's gonna fall on a case-by-case basis.
I think that's probably the reason they wanted to use the Charlotte Stormwater Design Manual, because it has everything laid out, supposedly. Yeah.
I mean, are we sure Charlotte Stormwater Design Manual lines up with where Union County wants to go?
That's right.
You know,
I've never read it. It doesn't sound like fascinating reading.
it's,
I'm sure it's got a lot of good information. The other thing is, we're supposed to support the open space and environmental protection strategies of the cluster standards and open space and rural area committees. And so we don't know what they've suggested yet, so kind of got the cart before the horse on that one.
Yeah, on that, I don't know if it might be the best move to strike that from this particular plan and defer to those committees for that portion.
Well, I think if it was presented right now to the Board of Commissioners as it is, there's a lot of unanswered questions that they're going to have that we've had, and it's like we're, as a planning board, kicking it on down the road, like I said. And I think there needs to be some more work and more study put into this and everything clarified more.
So perhaps there are portions of the Charlotte Stormwater Design Manual that could easily be applied with the design process that would not require an additional team for maintenance and inspection, such as was mentioned, the stream buffer portion, or calculations for the impervious or the runoff factor for a given site. Maybe that's something that should be explored in a little more detail.
I got a question too. Do you know where the funding is gonna come from? It's like the first thing it says, increased funding for education and grant programs.
Right, so I think mainly they want to try and get the funding through that for grants. We have a soil and water conservation district that is actually regionally through the state, so we have a branch for that here in Union County, so they want to try and get more grant money into that to try to expand on some programs that we already have here in the county. We already have several programs here that involve retrofitting developments that are currently existing and stuff like that.
And how do they go about that too? How do they go about picking to retrofit the developments that are ready?
So they, basically the Soil and Water Conservation District, you send in an application to them for whatever program it is that you're trying to accomplish, and based on how much money the district has from the state, they set
So
forth
it's
what
like the-
projects they're
So
gonna.
the development would have to come for.
Yes, the development or the homeowner, whoever it is, because these are retrofitting goals, so it is more specific properties typically, but an HOA could probably get together and do it as well. And sometimes it is better to get multiple homeowners in, because some of the stuff they do is like stream clearing. If you have big logs or stuff clogging up streams, causing flooding, they'll come and do that, but they typically try and do larger portions at once because it's just more efficient that way. So sometimes it's better if you can get multiple people together along that creek, stream, what have you, to do it. I would also like to point out that when looking at these recommendations, they are more, they're more towards the comprehensive plan side of things rather than actual ordinance language. So some of the ambiguity in here is baked in with the knowledge that this isn't actually ordinance language. The ordinance language comes afterwards. So it will get more specific as we go down, and specifically to the two things that, the two big things that you guys have been talking about. The Charlotte Stormwater Design Manual, part of the reason that was requested to be adopted is several of the municipalities within Union County already have that adopted as part of their stormwater controls. So it would kind of just bring more clarity and cohesion to development within the county. And when it comes to the limiting clear cutting and mass grading during development by keeping stream buffers and continuous forested areas and protected open space, that one, a lot of the ambiguity about that will become a little more clear later. When we're talking about protected open space, there are some recommendations from other committees that require protected open space, such as the Clustered Standard Committee, where our current provision allows you to cluster lots. You have protected open space with that. The idea is that that protected open space won't be clear cut and mass graded, wherever that may be within the development.
So real quick, where you mentioned that there are other municipalities within Union County that have
Yes.
adopted this, do they have a maintenance component to
I
it?
don't believe so, no.
So how exactly is that implemented? I understand the design process, but to Mr. McIntyre's point, these structures will fill up with silt, and if there's no enforcement mechanism, then sometimes they have no effect. Sometimes they could actually exacerbate the problem if they're not working as designed.
Yeah, I don't believe that they have somebody doing it unless they're specific, like town manager comes and does it. In terms of us, the only person that we have for the county that undergoes stormwater is our stormwater engineer, Brian Hawkins, who works with us down in the planning department.
Safe to say he wouldn't have time to go around.
Yeah, I know, we wouldn't have time to go around and inspect all of these, though.
Indian Trail, the town of Indian Trail has an inspection certification program.
Well, I can promise you, these HOAs don't have enough money figured in their fees and budgets to clean out one of these. I'm gonna say, on average for, a half-acre pond, you're probably $100,000+ per pond, and if you're in a 150 lot subdivision, there's probably a minimum of 3 of them in there.
Are you referring to the retrofitting through the program?
Yeah, I'm saying to clean them out.
This is the maintenance component.
Right, right.
For the
So
maintenance component of it.
the idea is more that they apply for it, the funding's already there through grants and stuff that the Soil and Water Conservation District has. Yeah. And some of them might require matching funds and stuff like that. That's more specifics towards what the individual grants are and what the programs are within the Soil and Water Conservation District.
So in the spirit that this is just more or less a blueprint to say we're going to move forward with exploring how exactly, all the details, the ordinances, the nitty-gritty.
Yes, yes, and then the ordinance language will come back to you at a later time once we've actually hammered all of that out.
So with the spirit of that in mind, do we have a motion for this particular item?
Mr. Chairman, I personally feel that I need more clarification on this for me to vote yea or nay. I'm just being very honest with you.
Do you feel that this is something we can get answers from this evening, or is this something?
Not from this evening, no. I would not want us to pass this and send it off to the Board of Commissioners and them come up and have the same line of questions that we've got, and we didn't answer them. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe a majority of one, but that's my thoughts. Pardon?
So to me, that sounds like we set up for a motion for denial based on
If you want it
criteria.
that way, then I'll make a motion to deny it, pending
I-
further clarification.
Any further discussion on that? Would you like to make the motion, Mr. Vice Chairman?
I just did, I thought. Make a motion to deny it until we get further clarification and it come back to us.
I second that motion.
Okay?
All in favor? That's 5-0.
Okay.
Recommendation denial pending some further clarification.
All right. Moving right along, the next committee to present will be the School Siting Committee, and here to present is Committee Chairwoman Monica Schrader.
Good evening, Chairwoman Schrader.
Good evening. Our committee made recommendations based on thinking about the safety of the children, alleviating traffic issues, and also with consideration for residents that live in the area in regards to school sites. And our committee recommended that new school sites have at least 2 driveways leading into the school site. We would like to see also the recommendation that they have a minimum requirement of 75 feet of undisturbed buffer from the main access road to the school, as well as a minimum of 50 feet undisturbed buffer along the remaining amount of the property, the side and the back. But we do realize that And the reason we were thinking about that is safety for the kids, to make sure that residents are considered, and, but that we wanted the school to have flexibility in utilizing that space. They're still allowed, they would be allowed to use the natural surface area for play areas, even organized sports, but not for structures for sports, for organized sports like bleachers or lighting or things like that. More like utilized for soccer or cross-country running trails, those kinds of things. We also would like this, and rather than being by right, as it is now, for it, a permit to go through the Board of Adjustment process for any new school site. And then, in regards to legislation, our committee would like the county to consider backing legislation that would amend or eliminate the NCDOT's responsibility for paying for those mitigations from the General Statute 136-18, where currently NCDOT pays for the mitigations, for the traffic mitigations for the new schools. We would like to see the school take that on as well. And in thinking about that, because we felt like, because NCDOT has so much going on, that maybe, maybe traffic mitigation isn't as heavily considered as it should be, and we would like the school to take that and take responsibility for that in honor of the residents that live in the area or that are passing through. So just really trying to think about our county, and also you should know that we tried not to be restrictive, understanding that we have urban and rural and everything in between, and we didn't want to be overstep and be too restrictive, but we did want to try to place some kind of language into the strategic plan, because this was an area that was considered to need a deep dive. So we just tried to provide a little more structure, in our opinion, after we had our expert presentations and all of that. So that's where we are.
Very good, thank you. Now, does anyone on the board have any questions for Chairwoman Schrader?
I guess I'm not clear on why would we want to pay for it if the state's willing to?
Why would you want the school to pay for it?
No, why would,
Our opinion is that the state has a lot to pay for already, and this legislation is relatively new, the past 4 years. In the past, the schools pay for it. I believe businesses pay for it. So why would the state need to take that on? If a new private school wants to come in to Union County, why would we want the state to pay for that? That's still taxpayer money. Why couldn't the school?
It's only for private schools?
It would be for all.
Oh,
I think
We were told we're not allowed to specify what we do for one, we have to
You're
do for them
correct.
all. But I believe there's only, yeah. But these were especially considered because we know we will be seeing more private and charter into our county over public.
Now, the spirit of that particular item, was that not driven by charter schools in particular? And some of the traffic issues that were generated?
Oh, yes, in the county, that we currently have issues, yes.
So I don't think this was a public school thing, and
There are traffic issues, obviously, with public schools, but I think in general, the committee believed that it's a responsibility that the state shouldn't be taxed with.
It's
If
a
a school
school.
wants to come in, they should pay for it.
It's a school thing.
Yeah.
Traffic, it should be taken on by the school. I feel it should be. I mean, if you're gonna build a school, you're gonna know you should know how many kids are gonna be there. You should have enough area on the grounds to get all those cars that are dropping their kids off and picking them up in the school grounds instead of being out on the road. That's my feeling.
Fully agree, and I think looking forward to, more people moving here in the small roads. We had several experts from the school district on our committee, and so we were mindful of that, and we really valued their expert opinions. But there are plenty of streets in this county that, if you happen to be coming back from Target or Starbucks at the wrong time, you will be sitting for an hour, or you will make a very illegal and dangerous turn to get out of there. So, yeah, we really do think that if you're coming in and you have a school, you should pay for the traffic mitigation. Why would the state pay for that?
It's just a minor point of clarification on that as well. When that statute was put into place, part of the issue when she's referring to the funding from NCDOT is that no funding was diverted to NCDOT to help them pay for the traffic mitigations. So,
And this is merely just a request. We're just going to our state legislators at a county level and saying, hey, would you please consider this officially?
Yes, we would like Union County to think about that and to start championing that and talking to elected officials and think about changing it. Yes, exactly.
Any further questions for Chairwoman Schrader?
Can't we already pay for those traffic mitigations privately? Can't the county kick in and pay for those mitigations if they wanted to already? Without waiting for DOT to do it, to come up with the money?
The challenge is on a state road, it would require NCDOT engineering and approval.
yeah, the
Right.
roads are owned by NCDOT,
Yeah.
so I don't think they can.
I'm sorry?
I said the roads are owned by NCDOT.
Yeah, I understand that, but if NCDOT did the plan, paying for the actual mitigation, can that not be done privately or by the county already?
County would have to budget for it,
Yeah.
they don't
Right.
have to budget now.
Right.
This would just kind of put it as a line item saying, hey, it's going to be there, it's coming regardless, should the county build another school. Versus, hey, let's hope the state pays for it, and if they don't, then maybe we'll do something about it.
Okay, but if I wanted to build a private school, and I had the plans and the location and what have you to build a private school, knowing that there was going to have to be some traffic mitigation for the school, and could it be that might be able to get NCDOT to do the plan, but then once they did the plan, couldn't that private entity pay for that entire?
That would have to be some type of interlocal agreement between that private school and NCDOT.
Okay, I was under the impression that if Union County wanted to do that now, they could. They can kick in the money if they want to, if they want road improvements, if we happen to find some money somewhere.
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
If the money's available, then it's at the discretion of the county to spend it.
For a private organization like a charter school or a private school, that would not apply.
Okay,
Unless they wanted to come up with the money, there'd be no mechanism to force them.
okay. Well, I didn't see that as being a whole lot different from a development where they require a development to have a turn lane or something like that. You're developing a piece of property, you're turning it into a school.
Maybe that would be a discussion to have as far as increase the requirements from NCDOT. And again, that'd be a legislative thing above our pay grade.
One more question, backing up, I'm sorry I got so many questions on all this stuff, but this is what we're here for. So, so school sites required to have at least 2 driveways. Can you help me out to understand, are there studies that's gonna help traffic flow? How does it help traffic flow? What are the numbers?
I don't have the numbers. We looked at a bunch of schools, the ones that have it, that don't, the roads, the feeders, and the committee believed that at least being able to access that school in 2 different ways. I mean, if there's an accident or there's, some blockage, that blockage spills out onto these roads that we're talking about that has a lot of traffic at, 2 different times of the day. So at least 2 access points so that people can not have just one lane in to drop off or pick up. And they have 2. Many of the public schools already have that. They already do that. You can access, for instance, Weddington's cluster from many, many, many angles. You can't walk there because there's no sidewalks, but you can drive there from many ways. So we did say 2 access roads to help with the mitigating the traffic, to allow people to have better flow in and out.
Does that include the buses too?
I'm sorry?
Does that include the buses? All the school buses?
We didn't
that are there?
specify. We just said 2 access roads, so one could be bus or, but bus is only for a period of time and then, so we didn't specify.
I'm glad you mentioned sidewalks.
Really?
I am. No, I think to Cuthbertson, for example, you have this massive school, and I see kids walking up and down the road, and there's no sidewalk. Was it considered to require a sidewalk in front of the school for this siting plan?
You will be happy to know I'm a huge advocate of sidewalks, but the conversation was discussed, and because there are a lack of connecting sidewalks on these roads, no, it wasn't a line item that was identified and recommended. But I can tell you, a lot of moms want sidewalks, and there aren't enough in the areas feeding into the schools. I can tell you that the school district gentlemen firmly believe that, that's kind of the sidewalks wouldn't be utilized certain times of the year because of, I don't know, heat, snow, whatever, but we didn't make that a recommendation. We talked about it a bit. A number of people really want it. I can tell you the public wants sidewalks, moms want sidewalks, but there are a lot of areas in this county that do not have any sidewalks. So they would go into the school. I think there would be obviously handicap accessibility in the school, in front of the school, but where it leads past that, maybe to nothing, maybe it would connect.
My experience, if you don't have it there, no one's going to put it there retroactively. And if you don't start somewhere, you will never see it.
I agree.
With gas prices being what they are, I suspect we're going to see some more people walking these days. But I feel like having sidewalks as part of this might be a decent idea.
I agree.
I think you should add it.
Any other questions for
And
Chairwoman?
Walking in the snow and the heat that's ridiculous. I grew up in the Northeast, and you walked in the snow. The sidewalks weren't maintained.
I agree 100%.
Any further questions, or do we have a motion?
Yeah, the special use permit, rather than
By right?
by right. Aren't we going to get into a situation there where you might not even be able to build a school where you need it?
I can answer that question for you. There's case law. I mean, case law says if you have a use that requires a special use permit, then it's presumed to be permitted use. Purpose for a special use permit is it takes it to a different level of scrutiny so that the Board of Adjustment can look at mitigating factors. And if there's any mitigating factors that may have adverse impacts on adjacent properties, then they can, add conditions to that permitting process that the school would have to do and incorporate into their plan. That's the whole purpose of the special use permit.
Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think you brought up a valid comment on sidewalks. And I could make a recommendation to approve this if sidewalks would be put somewhere in this for 2050, 2040, whatever the case may be. Because all we're doing is kicking it down. And I've lived in different states around, and school systems have got maintenance people that get out just like shopping center, and they walk a sidewalk and they sprinkle removal stuff down, shovel, things of this nature. And I think this can be overcome.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor? All opposed? It's 4-1. Thank you, Chairwoman Schrader.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Schrader. And the next committee that will be presenting is the Cluster Standards in Rural Areas. And this is in rural areas where water and sewer are present. Chairman Nathaniel Grove will be presenting the recommendations from this committee.
Good evening, Chairman Grove.
How are you all tonight? Thank you very much for your time. Good to see you again, Pam. So we all met to discuss the land utilization in areas where we have sewer and water present around Union County. What we came away with as a group was to lead through the simpler items first, is that we want to reaffirm the county is using net density to calculate. In other words, after floodplain, stream buffers, and things along those lines have been removed. So the committee was in complete agreement with that. We would like to maintain that. We would propose to maintain that initiative. One of the big things that we did, we put together a survey amongst ourselves, discussed what our features were that we wanted to protect. Streams, wetlands, whether it was agricultural land, things along those lines. The views from the road, I mean, depends on what the different citizens see. So we prioritized things, and we definitely wanted to say forested areas, wetlands, and streams were some of the biggest things. Some of the things that fell towards the bottom of the pack were agricultural land, things like that were already bare, being farmed. Where we moved forward with that was, how do we protect those things? So how do we protect wetlands? How do we protect woodlands, things along those lines? Well, as part of it, doing the cluster standards, we had discussed having initiatives that would incentivize developers, and we came up with a sliding scale for a density bonus. And what that would allow is the higher amount of land, percent of the property that the developer would dedicate towards green space, the greater the density of housing we would allow per acre, okay? Now, we did set a baseline of 10,000 square feet, and the reason, I'll give a little background to that, it was a big area. Pam can attest, it was a big area that was discussed heavily. How small of a lot would we allow, a developer to request? The idea of R8 was kicked around. It was 8,000 square feet for a lot, all the way up to, I believe, 20,000, things along those, about half an acre. Where we settled was, we all really liked a 12,000 square foot, but an R12 does not exist in Union County. So it was basically broken down to an R10 or an R15. From there, we voted and came to an R10, or a 10,000 square foot lot minimum. And to kind of give a little bit more clarity into that as well, is what that means is that the average of 1.25 homes per acre, units per acre, must be maintained. So if you allow for a small 10,000 square foot lot, you have to offset that with a larger lot, say across the street. You can't just put all 10,000 square foot lots in and call it good. That way, it enables the developer to work around those green spaces that we want to maintain. It allows them to have the flexibility to lay out and protect those areas. That was the reason why we went down that significant rabbit hole that I believe proved to be vital for our recommendations. Some of the other items were we wanted active recreation, such as tennis courts and pools and things like that would not be allowed on land designated as open space. We wanted it to be passive. In other words, trails, things where you're actually outdoors interacting with nature, not where you have hardscape or a pool or something like that. We consider that to be detrimental as the group. One of the other things we wanted to do was we wanted to set up a system to where we would be able to come back and touch base and see how things are going, because with the current progress of development, we believe that within 5 years we would see if these standards had actually gained traction and protected green space, or potentially to say a developer had found a loophole that would find a pathway around protecting the green spaces. So those are the main takeaways that our group came up with as proposed recommendations. Do you have any questions?
Questions for Chairman Grove at this time?
Who would own the green spaces?
What is it, one more time?
Who would own the green spaces?
The HOA.
Oh dear. I know how I'm going to vote.
Any further questions at this time?
So this 10,000 square foot lot size, that's a pretty big lot. So that's in that's in the clustered standards.
This would be a cluster standards. Our current standards actually require, what's our current standard?
Yeah,
Requires
so-
20.
So in terms of the cluster standards, this is already something that we have in our ordinance language. This committee was made to modify it because it's not really doing what we want it to do. We're not really getting the outcomes we want to. So things like the open space requirements and where all that's housed, that already all exists within the Unified Development Ordinance. Currently, the standards for it allow you to cluster in R40 down to 20,000 square foot lots and in R20 down to 15,000 square foot lots. So if that answers your question. So this would just allow you to go even smaller in your clustering and preserve more open space.
And the sizing of the lot was a measurable discussion that the group discussed over and over about protecting the green space and making sure that we offered an incentive to people to utilize this. As he discussed, we are not seeing this being utilized enough, which means there's either not enough incentive or there's more value in breaking it up into 1 acre lots or things along those lines, depending on what your zoning is. Again, we're trying to protect green space, and this was the way we saw to best do that as a group.
So how are you classifying, I mean, help me understand how we're classifying rural areas.
Go ahead.
It would be areas designated as rural by the current land use map.
So if somebody's got a R6, a development that's R6, it touches it, and they're trying to rezone it to be R6 from, say, R40, and it's an adjoining development. What's the,
So it would depend on the land use map and where it's classified within there. If it was classified within an area that's labeled as rural residential, the land use plan recommends that area being 1 unit per acre, correct?
Yeah.
So it really just depends on wherever that falls within the county land use map that was already adopted last year. Yeah, last year.
And to build on that, from discussion, the owner would still have the ability to go through the rezoning process. It would not impact them from not being able to do that. This offers an avenue that's already built into the ordinance to where they could right of way go and do it, move forward.
Yes, yeah. None
That's
of
the
this-
biggest takeaway.
Yeah, none of this is required. This is an option that you're giving to developers to say you can go with this kind of development.
By right option.
Yes.
By
by
right.
right, rather than having to
Thank
go through rezoning?
It's by right,
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
so they don't even have to go in front of the board.
Thank you, Chairman Grove. Time for some internal discussion and any motions. Mrs. Duda.
I have a comment. And
Bring it on.
First of all, I want to thank Chairperson Grove and the committee that I was part of. It was a great experience, and they were great people. Mr. Grove there knows I'm going to have a comment here on item number 3, the open space protection section. I did have an issue with this. I didn't vote with the committee at that time. And the reason being is I'm not a proponent of the incentivizing the density bonus. And the reason being is because the Board of Commissioners had agreed already to change it from gross to net as far as the calculation of density is concerned. I actually saw this as counterproductive, that it almost kind of allowed it to go back to almost the gross if they wanted to be by incentivizing. I understand open space is the push here, but I didn't agree with that. I also didn't agree with the 10,000 a square foot. I was hoping it would be closer to 15,000, but, you know, I have
We
respect
just didn't
for-
have a 12,000. That was where we
Exactly,
all.
exactly, I got it. And then the last thing was, I don't think you mentioned, Nathaniel, but they also said this standard would apply to all residential zoning districts throughout Union County, where I wanted to err more on the cautious side. Since we were going to have this 5-year check-in plan, I would like to, I had voted to say, hey, why don't we see how this goes first before we open it up to everybody? So those are my comments, just to be considered. Outside of that, it was a great experience. I think we really came up with some really good ideas. So thank you for you being the chairperson.
Thank you.
I would tend to agree with the reluctance to go with a incentive as far as increasing density. And the reason I say that is just from a development standpoint, the less infrastructure, less roads, less grading, that's incentive for the developer. I think the reason you're not seeing this, it probably has more to do with the lack of sewer availability than anything else. Could be mistaken there, but I would tend to agree with Mrs. Duda in that respect, as well as the minimum lot size. And I do have one question. Charlie's piqued my interest. As far as the HOA not controlling that, what just in your perfect world would be the ideal there?
Who, me?
Yes.
I'd deed it to somebody. I mean, I have a piece of property now that's got a retention pond that catches water not only from my property or runoff from my property, but from 2 other properties. Try and get those other 2 properties to pay for fixing the retention pond or looking after it after they've changed hands a couple of times, even when they didn't. And so it just creates a huge, big, horrible situation. And then HOAs are very shaky organizations anyhow.
Who do you
Just
think?
depends on who happens to be on the committees at that time, whether you've got somebody who's really working on it or somebody who is just kind of laissez-faire. So I'm not a fan of an HOA looking after anything that is very, very important.
Who do you think would want to take on that liability? Are you thinking a land trust or?
Maybe a management company?
No, I'm thinking deed it to one of the landowners, one of the people that live there. Otherwise you're not gonna, they have a vested interest in keeping it right because they live there. And so I think anything other than a deed to one of those people in one of those dwellings is going to be a difficult situation to try and find a responsible party.
Would you want to take that responsibility on, knowing that when the bill came due for stormwater maintenance, that it'd be on you exclusively?
But that's part of your stuff that you bought. You took the responsibility when you signed the deed.
Think you'd have many takers?
Don't know.
I would like to say that it is currently in the ordinance, and that is how it works right now, so we already have this happening in the county.
That it's deeded to an individual or
No, where it's,
deed to the HOA?
It's deeded to an HOA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not happening very much.
Right.
It's an interesting concept.
I don't trust HOAs at all. That's just me. That's just me.
yeah, the only alternatives really that we thought of was donating to the Land Conservancy, which they wouldn't.
They're not gonna look
wanna take
after it
anything
either.
that's
There's no
small,
money there.
Or the county, which the county.
The only people that have skin in the game are the people that live there.
Exactly.
And those are the ones that need to have that property in their name, a
So
portion of it.
here's a silly question as far as that goes, and I understand, trust me, I understand your reluctance to deal with HOAs. What about requiring a surety for the maintenance of those structures that the HOA would be responsible
You're gonna
for?
get into something where you're gonna have to have so much county government looking after it that it's just gonna be,
You don't think
the deed takes care of it that day.
If I may interject,
you don't think that
I
the
apologize for
HOA
interrupting.
dues-
Huh?
the dues that they're paid to the HOA?
HOAs are all
That-
across
that
the
takes
board.
care
There's
of-
really,
that
really
takes care
good
of all
ones
of
and there's really, really bad ones.
But that takes care of all
There's developers
The
that
open
take,
space.
there's developers that develop property and keep the property from being fully developed just so they can maintain the HOA, so they can grift the other people.
Okay, I live in a community where we have an HOA.
Yes,
We pay dues.
right.
We have 2 ponds. Those ponds are maintained through the dues that we pay
You
for
got a
the
good
HOA.
one. That's great. I just sold a piece of property that had an HOA. I just sold it, thank goodness.
All right, Chief.
So in these wetlands and those areas in stream, so those, the natural areas, they're not gonna have basins in them. They're not gonna have detention basins in them.
You've picked up what I was getting ready to say. These are not, the areas that we'd be protecting are undisturbed. What you're talking about, the most disturbance we would expect to see is a walking trail through it. So what's there would already be trees and wetlands and a pond if it was already there. These are not things that we had no intention of being plowed in to be worried about being filled with sediment. I'm just explaining.
I've got property that's got woods on it, guys, and I have to get a forestry plan. As a farmer in this state, I have to have a forestry plan all the time. And it's no different than what you're talking about.
That would be something I believe the HOA we could require to do.
Well,
I mean, it's fair if you're required to do it.
yeah.
As far as Mr. Griffin's concerned, HOA is a four-letter word.
There are real good ones. They just vary so much. They just vary so much, and it's a
Carrying
difficult
on.
thing.
Hey, we're having a good time
Talk
here.
to a lawyer about an HOA.
Oh, trust me,
They'll roll their eyes back as far as they can in their head.
I'm well aware.
We have 3 lawyers on our HOA in that right now.
You got a good one. You got a good one. What is the protection of wetlands and what's involved in protecting the wetlands and views and agricultural lands in that order? What's involved in that?
So what we had done is we brainstormed the things that we cared about. In other words, if we're going to do a cluster standard, what do we want to see protected? Like, what are we trying to protect by minimizing the amount of land we're actually disturbing? And these were some of the things that were brainstormed. I mean, is it agricultural? Is it large forestry stands? Is it wetlands? Because there's some plans to mitigate wetlands if you disturb them, things like that. And we prioritized them from most desired to protect to least desired to protect. We could provide that data, but basically wetlands and streams were at the top, and agricultural land was, and views from the road was somewhere in the middle. Ag was towards the bottom.
All right.
I hope that answers
So
the
you're
question.
talking about viewing somebody else's property and then the agricultural lands are somebody else's property as well.
Basically, driving down the road, what people said is they didn't want to see 10 houses, house, driving down the road. They basically wanted to be able to say, drive down the road, see one driveway going in and all trees.
So when somebody's
was
got
the
a
idea.
view, when somebody owns a view, or they own one of these protected locations, we've got a couple of houses that got built there, and we've got an HOA looking very constantly and judiciously from all their protected stuff for their natural area. And then the folks that own the view or own the agricultural land want to do something else with that land, what happens?
I do not understand. I guess I don't understand the question
Right,
because they're not
I
going
own
to, it's
some
not their
farmland
land.
in this county. I own some farmland in this county.
Understood.
Yes, all right. I'm 67 years old. I have 2 daughters, neither of which live in Union County.
Okay,
They don't want the farmland.
okay.
I got to do something. I'm not going to last forever. What am I going to be allowed to do with my property?
You would
Will I be
able-
allowed, if it's within view of something that's already there, will I be allowed to rezone it and build houses on it? Or will that
Absolutely.
ruin the view?
No, absolutely not. So what we had, some of the examples, we actually looked at example cases. And there was a number of cases that were open farmland with tree stands around the perimeters, some blotches in the middle, around some wet holes, let's say. These were true examples that had come to Union County.
Right.
What we had said was, yes, we would basically develop the farmland that was already cleared while protecting the tree stands and trying to protect the largest groups of trees if you decided to go with the cluster standards. Or, like we already discussed, if you rezoned it entirely, you could just go the other route and clear all the trees. It would basically allow you to put more homes on each acre of already cleared land, because that's the lowest thing we prioritize versus wetlands and trees.
It's a noble thing you're trying to do. I understand.
Okay.
I understand. It's a very noble thing you're trying to do. And I think it would probably be better than little cookie cutter houses all over there. It's just, these sticky wickets come up, and I'm just concerned about it. I'm just concerned, that's all.
I think the problem really is, that we're trying to conserve this land, and I think clusters are good, and I think preserving what's around it's good. But the problem is the view that you see when you ride by these neighborhoods. Let's just be real. You know, like,
Warren Buffett's.
You're saying it.
Warren Buffett's
Cricket Fair
favorite
House.
saying, if you buy a house with a view, be sure and buy the view too.
That's right.
so
Yeah.
what I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
I
is,
just-
is, are we better off to put a higher standard in place for buffers? Planted back buffers, because even if you're riding down, 75, I lived off 75, and they got those houses going in down through there, and too much words, but, you know, I work for these developers every day, and they do not do enough of a landscape buffer or at the entrance in the front of the neighborhood.
Yeah, some
To
do,
really
some
just
don't.
like, when you go by, you don't see it. Go through Pinehurst, go
Go up
around
84.
Raleigh, they require,
Go up 84. See all that,
So you're
all the
talking
new
about
houses
some
they're putting
kind
up
of
there.
a screening buffer in
Yes.
addition to.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
a thicker buffer, because that's what you see, you know?
Yeah.
Are you
And I think,
recommending,
but I think the cluster's good. I mean, I think small lots are good. People don't want to mow grass. People don't want to maintain yards.
Yeah.
are you recommending the buffer at the entrance only or
No,
the
I'm saying,
perimeter of the
I
property?
mean, yeah, protect your neighbors. I mean, all the way around. I mean, I think.
You want to
I
see the
think-
street going in, but you don't want to see all the houses when you're
Yeah.
driving down the road.
That's right. And better streetscapes when you pull into place. You don't have, you know, you pull in there and you got 500 red maples and half
Put
of
it on a
them
piece
is
of paper.
east and all
Either
that.
a buffer of trees or a berm, trees on it, something.
Put it on a piece of paper.
Chairman Grove, was there any discussion in the group about a buffer around the perimeter of the property?
There was discussion about putting buffers at the front of the road, not on perimeters, because if we put it around perimeters, potentially it would work in counter to Mr. Griffin. So at the road, we had discussed that, but we did not establish a number.
Oh, my goodness, and the debate
And
continues.
I would say specifically because whatever those buffers would be would most likely be factored into your open space requirements. So they didn't want to necessarily be locked into saying you need a 40-foot buffer at the front of the property off the road, assuming that that 40 feet might take up 30% of your open space just for the buffer. And then you're not meeting the goal of the committee, which the goal of the committee was to help preserve rural character and preserve environmental features. And they didn't see the view from the road as actually counter to preserving environmental features because it's worse for wildlife and whatnot when you're basically forcing the wall to go right between houses and the road rather than off in this forested area in the back of the site. Essentially, in short, the explanation for the order of priorities.
I think we've had some good discussion, got some good points here. Again, I don't see the need for the density bonus necessarily, but that's my 2 cents. Do we have any motion taking into consideration some of the conversations that we've had?
I'll make a motion to deny.
Second.
All right, we have a second. All in favor of the motion to deny this? All opposed? Motion fails. Do we have another motion?
I move we approve it with items 1, 4, and 5.
Do we have a second for the motion currently proposed?
So you want, Charlie, you just want 1, 4, and 5 to be in the,
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right. The motion to approve items 1, 4, and 5. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chairman Grove.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Grove. The next committee to present will be the Open Space and Rural Areas Committee. And here to present this will be Chairwoman Laura Varela.
Good evening.
Good
Sure.
evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Committee. Oh, wow. It's interesting, I actually have a third of my committee here. Mr. Griffin sat on my committee, as well as Cindy Hunter. And we did have we had consistent themes coming through that you heard from the stormwater and also the clustered group. And I'll be touching base on that. But promoting conservation and quality growth are not in opposition, but very complementary. Growth is happening all around us, and we must determine how we will conserve and develop the rural area in Union County. It started with the 2014 plan. Then we have the Union County 2015 or 2050 comprehensive plan. And so I know there's a lot of thought and there's a lot of public opinion that has come forward. So my committee has come up with the following recommended strategies. First is to develop a rural land use plan. Data on sensitive areas such as the national heritage sites, the national significance, the national heritage sites, somehow did not make it from the 2014 plan into the current land use map. The proposed rural future land use plan would be a blueprint for future development. Over the plan horizon, that would be typically looking at 15 to 20 years. We have a land use map, but we don't have a rural use plan that can guide the planners in long-term decisions. It is not a zoning map, nor does it require a specific action to implement, such as rezoning, but it would be a tool used when evaluating land use decisions. It would be a map of where the community feels development is appropriate. There's always been public comment in these comprehensive plans. Duplin County has developed one just in June of this year. Polk, Randolph, Chatham counties also in North Carolina, as well as the town of Davidson, has a rural use plan. By minimizing the sprawling development patterns and impervious surfaces, communities can better avoid losing water and reduce the effects of future droughts. Our second point ties in with the rural land use plan, and that's we recommend, in addition to the ordinance, to add a pre-plan process that includes a sketch plan designed by the developer. This addition would also include a reference summary design guide through a rural land use plan for examples on a conservation development. The North Carolina Department of Wildlife Resources has their Green Growth Toolbox manual developed and filled with many examples of developments here in North Carolina. And it's not just the Wilmington area, and it's not just the Raleigh-Durham area, but it's everywhere. And it's a resource, so we're not having to reinvent the wheel. Other counties are struggling with the same predicament here, and there is even draft language for like cluster development and so forth. They have a two-page clear and concise step guide for land development that would provide developers with what is needed for conservation, and it removes the guesswork. It gives a very nice step-by-step approach on that. Number 3 was to prioritize natural features. The committee recommends, and again, in this priority, this was, if you have a specific piece of land and you had all these entities there, how would you prioritize what needed greater protection? Or, you know, further, if you had something that didn't have it, then you could say, I don't have to consider, you know, like if there isn't a stand of natural forest there. But our priorities that we came up with were the forests, then the stream buffers, and then the wetlands. As you had said earlier, yes, there are set 50-foot and 100-foot stream buffers, so we don't need to change that. Our 4th item recommendation was to protect open space. The committee recommends preserving a minimum of 30% of the overall development protected as open space. And then we also require open space, 30% minimum required, and they could go larger, but the minimum of 30% for developments with 10 or more lots, and with no cluster provisions. And again, at this point in time, with 6 months, we really talked heavily about the cluster development. We liked the idea. We didn't have enough time to develop a clear recommendation. Plus, we felt it was putting the cart before the horse. You need a rural land use plan to direct you to say what are the priorities, where you would say that cluster development would be appropriate in your evaluation there. And then finally, minimizing the clear cutting. The committee supports the recommendation of the Stormwater Committee by increasing the runoff calculations for disturbed soil, and requires the protected open space to help absorb runoff. The committee also recognizes the need to retain as much native plant and tree species for overall preservation of essential insects and wildlife. Natural ecosystems provide us with trillions of dollars worth of free services. There is flood and stormwater control. There is water and air purification. There's crop pollination. There is groundwater recharge, as well as climate regulation. So there is a lot in those undisturbed areas that there's more than meets the eye on that. But finally, Union County is unique in its agricultural heritage and its rural character. It is also a substantial input to our income for taxes. Union County is number 3 overall in North Carolina for farm cash receipts, reporting $464 million made in 2013 when they put the 2014 plan together. And I looked on site for the USDA North Carolina stat book, and for 2020 they had listed $416 million. That's a decrease, so that's saying we are losing some farmland here, so these are the recommendations, and I thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions that anyone will have.
Thank you, Chairwoman Varela. This time, do we have any questions for the Chairwoman?
I don't.
When you say minimize clear cutting, is that per lot or is that the whole development?
You know,
And what's the minimize? How much?
I think we need to minimize as much disturbance as possible. If one person's putting a house on like a 1-acre lot, a typical developer, it saves them actually money just disturbing the 40% where they're putting the house and the driveway and such. what it's saying is the current situation on some of the larger developments that come in and clear the whole thing, there are just major consequences that are not being realized. And one of the big issues is the stormwater, because the fact that you lose all the filtration from that area, whether it's woods or if it's prairie grasses. It's far better than someone putting in turf after grading it down to the clay. It has the, it's almost impermeable, and that's why we get such sheet flow runoff that's occurring nowadays in Union County here. So one of the ideas is, yeah, expand the stormwater retention basin. The other one is that you have it, that you leave the undisturbed area, let it flow there, and that you grade it properly where it flows into that, and it percolates down, recharges the groundwater, and it's a win-win situation.
Any further questions at this time? Thank you very much. At this time, I encourage any board discussion and any motions that may be presented.
So, and Charlie, I think you agree with this, but, you know, we've got, you know, some local farmers that are more of the development situation, Charlie.
What's that?
And we have a certain number of local farmers who are more of a developer than they are
Yeah,
a farmer.
and there'll be more, because Union County is a bedroom community of Mecklenburg County. That's the way it's going.
So what we have, a lot of times, and Charlie sees this, I'm sure, is we have a farmer comes in, or they set up a business as a farmer, they clear cut the land, they stop it, they grow it, they farm it for a year, and
Yes.
they develop it.
That's right. That's right. They do. I
So,
don't know how you're gonna get around that.
so Charlie, how do you know, how does, in spirit of this, my understanding is North Carolina does have a farmland preservation, a farmland assessment program.
Yeah.
How is that applied to something like open space, or for farmers such as yourselves who are trying to preserve your legacy and sell it as a farm if it's in land trust, and get that money back from that land trust rather than developer coming in and developing it?
It's not economically as good as developing the property by huge amounts. So if you're trying to maximize the value of the property, when you do decide to sell it, you won't do that. And so that's, we're gonna end up, I think, my thinking is, this won't be in my lifetime, but Union County's gonna end up just like a good portion of Chicago did when my great aunt and uncle lived out there. They lived out there when they had a garden, but now it's all underneath asphalt. Some of the best farmland there is beneath about 6 inches of asphalt, concrete. And that's just the way it went. And so
Wasn't that the whole purpose of having
That's
rural
a
land use
purpose
plan?
of doing it, but I
Yeah.
don't want to restrict other adjoining landowners for being able to do something with their property.
No, I agree.
That's not my point. If we try and do that, I think we'll get lawsuits.
But if you look at even at Duplin County and how they did it, it was very,
Right.
it was very black and white about looking at, here's a picture of the county, here's the towns, and so there are the
Right.
corridors, of where it was developing. Then they had like another like crescent of where residential would be. But they also marked where were the significant forests, where were the significant farmland.
Right.
And again, we were talking about the rural character and the view and such. And I think,
that's great.
as what Ms. Duda had said, there's other alternatives, and this is where the rural land use plan can bring out, here's some other options. And when you look at Duplin, they said, putting some in protected, where there were protected farmlands. and other, people could rent them and put their crops. Right now, because of the Ukraine situation, it's better to be a farmer than selling your property. But, 2 years ago, or, well, maybe not, but I gotta say,
Laura, if I'm a developer and I don't have to bulldoze with a certain amount of that piece of property, that's just lovely. That's just great. I just leave the rest of it alone. I don't have to spend the, whatever it costs per acre to clear cut that stuff, that's fine. But now, there are some folks where they want to really maximize the number of dwellings that they can get on the property. And so they'll come to the planning board and they'll go to the county commissioners and they'll ask for a little denser development. And in the meantime, they've bought a piece of property, they're clearing it, and once they clear it, they farm it for a few years, and then they sell it, and it's already done. And that's, and I guess what we're talking about there in our committee, and I'm afraid I was absent a lot of the times, but we're trying to keep that from being done. Again, it's a very noble thing. It's a very, very noble thing. I'd much prefer to see woods, natural wooded areas, than I do somebody else's corner of their house. I have one after another after another.
well, it can be done, because there's also, that's also part of the comprehensive plan. In your comprehensive plan, you've got municipalities which are gonna be your high and medium density. That's where you do the building, because that's where all the sources, but in the rural
Another thing you've got here
area.
in Union County is we've got property that won't perk.
Yeah. Well,
you've
and
got
that's
it.
one reason on my committee, because the other one had water and sewer. Ours are in well and septic.
Right.
And, and so, but, being in the middle of a rural area, yes, I don't want to deny a family splitting off some property to have, a place for their son or their daughter to go up. But having a 600 house subdivision that just crops up in the middle of nowhere, where there's no, school that is already
Right.
there for them, the transportation's gonna be horrible. It makes a bigger problem for the county.
I
So
know.
one of the ways you do it is you have this plan,
Well,
and that is something that,
I feel at this time, we are getting a little redundant. I'd like to move the ball forward, and I do appreciate the conversation. On the one hand, I understand we have the farmers and the developers that have their motivations. The other hand, I personally feel as though this board's here to represent the greater good for the citizens of Union County, not necessarily the few that stand to profit from this. To that end, huge fan of property rights, but the fact is you're only entitled to the use that you bought the property at. So if you buy an RA 40, then that's the use you're guaranteed. You're not guaranteed zoning denser. I don't feel as though lawsuits are really warranted or justified to get denser zoning. To that end, this is the 2050 plan. This is saying, here's what we see to get us to 2050. Now, things are sprawling, growth is inevitable, it is happening. But to me, the spirit of this plan is just to get us a pathway to 2050 to preserve what we have, and it will be reevaluated. As you mentioned, the 2014 plan has already come and gone. We're in 2022 talking about the 2050 plan. This will be reevaluated. But I think it's a good roadmap. I think it's a good goal. And that's my 2 cents, but I'd love to move forward with a motion of some description.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say I think we ought to, I make a motion that we accept this as it's been prepared and bring it to a vote.
Vice Chairman Fisher presented a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second for this motion. All in favor of approving as presented. All opposed? Thank you very much. As we move on, I apologize. I know I'm a little, I hate to say curt. I just do want to move this along, and
Absolutely. All
so
right,
hopefully we can try to avoid any redundancy and just plow through it.
Yes, yes. Our next committee to be presented will be the Litter Task Force, and this will be presented by Chairman Michael Avola.
Good
evening.
Chairman Evola.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. So with the Litter Task Force Committee, we have a few different recommendations here. I wish we had some of the photos that we had seen in our committee meetings at some of the problem areas throughout the county, and I'll say it's devastating to see just the condition, that the amount of litter that's going on in our county right now. So hopefully some of these recommendations would mitigate the issue. So first off here, it's recommended that Union County fund a new county staff member position whose responsibilities would be to coordinate litter reduction initiatives. It is also recommended that Union County apply for the Keep America Beautiful designation, join the coalition of over 40 counties throughout North Carolina that are a part of that program. It's a very structured and coordinated organization that would support those initiatives here. It's a community-involved organization. It's something that we don't really have right now. So we had a presentation from Lancaster County in their program. So we felt that would benefit us as well. We recommend that Union County establish a permanent litter task force committee with appointments made by the Board of Commissioners. The committee would oversee the Keep America Beautiful program here in the county, continue the conversation of eliminating the issue of litter in our county. We also recommended that the composition of the committee would ideally be a combination of at-large and geographic representation, because there are parts of the county that have more of an issue with litter than others, so we want to have a large representation overall. We also recommended that Union County sustain and expand the hazard material disposal program to make disposal of hazardous materials available year-round instead of once a year. Currently, it's just one day out of the year, and some of the pictures we saw where you've got people throwing away different types of solid human waste and paint and a whole bunch of different things just on the side of the roads. You see a lot of issues in dead-end corridors, and so if we expanded that program instead of just once a year, incentivizes folks to properly dispose of those materials. It was recommended that we shift the county funding model from a pay-as-you-dispose to a fixed fee model to incentivize the use of the solid waste disposal facilities, with the goal of eliminating the per-visit disposal fees. Kind of an analogy like, how you go to Cane Creek Park, and some people right now, they pay to go every time. They have that entrance fee. So instead of that, we would look to probably an annual fee that you would pay, and that way no longer pay as you go. You pay once per year, and you can go anytime that the facilities are open. We also recommend that the county advocate for a statewide bottle deposit legislation as part of the county's legislative agenda, as the use of single-use plastics is the highest contributors to litter. And I'd actually like to share a number with you. Division 10 of NCDOT, which makes up Anson, Cabarrus, Mecklenburg, Stanley, and Union counties, it was 1,647,270 pounds of litter in 2021 alone. The 2021 litter report from NCDOT doesn't specify how much per county, but certainly considering our population size, I'd say we probably contribute quite a bit to that.
Can you please repeat that number?
Yes, that's 1,647,270 pounds of litter over the 5 counties: Anson, Cabarrus, Mecklenburg, Stanley, and Union.
That's 1 year.
1 year.
And that's all that was collected.
Yep, and that's exactly just what was collected.
That's gonna be
And that was a total cost of $2,413,544.53 of taxpayer money. to collect that amount of that litter. Also, we'd recommend that Union County recognize enforcement as a key part of litter control and continue to support coordination between solid waste, planning, environmental health, and the Sheriff's Department to address the issue of litter in our communities. That's something that our committee didn't really talk about a lot as a way of, with enforcement to mitigate. We talk more about some of these after-the-fact mitigation proposals. But we definitely recognize that enforcement is going to be a key part of mitigating litter in our county. And that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. We have any questions for Chairman Evelyn?
I do, Chairman. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I'm not really familiar with the Keep America Beautiful designation or what that means. Does that provide boots on the ground, people out there actually picking up litter?
So with the Keep America Beautiful, because it's a national organization,
Right.
and there are chapters all throughout the country, so it's really organizing the chapter here in the county and having folks here, whether that's part of this Litter Task Force Committee heading that initiative, or having a board of members outside of that organizing. But it's not something that we necessarily receive folks from outside the county to come in and help pick up the trash, but it's all county participation.
Okay, because what I'm seeing is lacking in these recommendations, and help me understand, is boots on the ground.
Right.
Like, my experience, I pick up Medlin Road all the time. And I'm not saying that for, oh, look at me, you know, how great that is, but I'm just curious where the boots on the ground's coming from. I mean, have we gone out to the high schools and seen if there's any county pride and you know, community service, and maybe get them involved and they get some bonus points from the curriculum? Or is there incentives for volunteer folks in the areas to be able to go out and pick up trash, or to be able to instill some pride in the areas? Because it's actually, in my opinion, you have to change the mindset and the pride of your area. A lot of this is administrative and building that infrastructure, and I appreciate that. But I don't see a lot of boots on the ground and any strategy of the boots on the ground.
Right.
They have
That
a
is
lot.
something that we, oh, sorry.
They have a lot of towns that have litter sweeps, but the biggest thing is, it's like the kids get points for volunteering, the high school kids. But the biggest thing is, a lot of the towns are afraid to put them out on major roads, whereas where all the debris is, because they're afraid they're gonna get hit or something. And there's no police escorts, there's no police that are there to help out. That's why you see on major roads, like all the side roads, like 84, Weddington has it like twice a year. But they don't want anybody on 84 because it's so busy. They'll
And
go
what
down all
happened
side
to
roads.
to the inmates then? We used to have inmates
Well,
do
yeah,
a lot of
when we
that stuff
first moved
too.
here, they had the chain gang.
Yeah.
Now, that was something that was brought up, it was a question in our committee, one of our meetings. To my knowledge, we were informed that is now, it's state law, that is no longer allowed. That's
Right.
what we were led to believe,
Can't do
because
it.
we had asked about that.
Because I'm just
Against
thinking,
their
this is a
Cruel
great,
and
this is a
unusual.
great
Yeah,
task
against their
force.
rights.
This is a great opportunity to build pride in our community and to be part of it, you know, to take some action. So that's why I'm saying, it's just to have the teeth. You need, I would think, some strategy of how you're gonna get some boots on the ground. It's great to have all this organization and stuff like that, but who's actually out there doing it?
Right, exactly. And that is something that we had talked a lot about in our meetings. We need something with teeth. We need people, boots on the ground. And right now, we just need to get that structural foundation that we just do not have, that administrative aspect, to get this started. And then if we have this Keep America Beautiful program chapter here in the county, we can go to the schools, the high schools, the middle schools. We can partner with the sheriff's office. We can partner with solid waste and have a coordinated effort to go and start doing those things.
And is that what Keep America Beautiful has done in other areas? That's some of the strategies they've used
Right,
to get the community involved?
Yeah,
Okay.
they have all of those tools and sort of recommendations of what you should be doing, and they share those strategies with you.
Right, they require, part of the program is that they have you do certain things, like you have to have litter awareness meetings in your community and stuff like that. You actually have somebody that's in charge of this, which we have up there funding the new position within the county to coordinate the litter reduction initiatives. That would be the person that would be in charge of the Keep America Beautiful designation. And they would go through all of the materials that Keep America Beautiful has. They would be able to interact with the schools and try and do that kind of stuff. This is the infrastructure for it.
I understand it's a
And
broad
then-
scope, I know,
Yeah.
I understand.
And then ultimately, it does fall on the citizens. You can't force them to, but
No, I understand
this
that.
is the,
I'm just thinking it's a great opportunity to build pride into the county. It's just an opportunity. And one last thing is, in the tactics, I know it's not the strategy, it would be great, because I clean up streets and roads and stuff, it'd be great if we had like a garbage pail at some designated points, so people actually, if they threw it, you could pick it up and actually put it in. It's just a suggestion for people who are out doing it. Thank you.
Union County has a recycling place now, right? Did they open up a new one?
Yeah, it's kind of a convenience center, and they moved one over to Gold Line Road just recently, and they're getting ready to establish one at the Lantern House over the weekend.
And what do they take? Everything, or?
No.
There's one up in, it's right on the border of Union and Mecklenburg and South Carolina. It's called Foxhole Recycling.
That's operated.
That place is unbelievable. It costs $80 a year. I go there. It costs $80 a year. And you can take everything. The only thing, if you have like a refrigerator, stove, chair or something, it costs, depending on the size, it costs between $18 and $25 to get rid of it on top of the 80. And then if you bring any yard waste, it goes by, like I have a little pickup truck, it costs me $8. I mean, my garbage guy, I don't have a garbage company. I did, but they went up to like, I don't know, it was like over $200. I'm paying $80 to go to a recycling place. They take, I mean, you can take paint. It doesn't have to be dried out or anything. They'll take up to 100 pounds of paint at one time. The place is unbelievable.
No, is that one of
That's
our,
what Union County needs, but they need a couple of them because it's so big. They need them on both sides of the county.
is actually one of our.
Because the people on the one side aren't going to drive all the way down to the other side to dump off their trash.
Right. Union County actually has a landfill over Austin Cheney Road that will accept all those materials as well. So it's owned and operated by Union County, just like Foxhole is owned and operated by Mecklenburg County.
Where is it located?
Well, the one in Union County is Austin Cheney Road.
Northern part of the county.
But it was that Foxhole facility, one of our committee members had talked about, he lives in Marvin, and that was sort of that led that discussion to, instead of a pay-as-you-go, it's just a one-time annual fee you pay, incentivizing, well, I don't have to pay every time I go, I have to worry about cash, things like that, and just, I can go whenever it's convenient for me during the hours of operation to dispose of all those materials.
Any further questions for the chairman?
I move we adopt it as presented.
A second. I support you there on a second.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we have a motion. All in favor? All opposed? There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and last but certainly not least is the Broadband Access Committee. And here to present is Chairwoman Lily Melamides.
All right, Chairwoman, please don't ask me to pronounce your last name because I will botch it.
Melamides. It is phonetic.
Melamides.
It's exactly as it's spelled.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so hopefully this will be very painless. And so I was part of the 2050 Committee for Ag, right? So preserving ag, talking about ag. I'm a Union County Master Gardener. You know, I live out in the county. We do a lot with ag, and we understand, we respect the fact that that is one of the biggest, businesses in the county. We have been number 3 in wheat production, soy corn, et cetera, right? And so one of the big things that we talked about in this committee is we identified a big need and a big gap in broadband or just internet connection in general. Me personally, right, it took me close to 4 years to get internet at my house, like decent speed. I work from home. I'm in technology. It's really important. We also have farmers, Mr. Griffin, right? I'm sure you can attest, your equipment is high tech. It requires those connections. If you
Yes.
don't have those connections,
Our
you will lose.
Our internet provider, I think, uses old worn hay baling wire.
One, they probably do. They probably do. And I'm sure that I probably know who that provider is. But anyway, so that was one of the big things that we recognized as we talked to citizens as well. We realized that it's a huge issue, even in some of the spots where you would think it would be available. On the broadband committee, we talked through a lot of different things. We looked at maps to identify the different areas that, had, it was almost like a desert, if you will, right? You've got food deserts, and then you've got the internet deserts of the county. And it was pretty shocking. I personally received an email from a woman who lives right off Gold Mine. There's a big subdivision that's going in over there. Family land, she's been there for 25 years. In the 25 years that she's lived there, she has not had internet at all. When the pandemic hit, her son, who is in high school, had to drive up the road about 1.5 miles to go to one of his relatives' houses in order to be able to do his schoolwork, right? It's a problem. It's a huge problem. So anyway, on to our recommendations. So flexible solutions, we're asking that the county does not focus on advocating just for one technology. It's really important that we consider 5G, cellular, fiber, and even satellite internet. It should absolutely be supported by the county as the best solution for specific areas, right? So don't focus on one technology. We have to look at everything as a county. Affordability. So a lot of folks don't realize that there are programs as well for subsidized broadband, subsidized internet. That's another huge issue as well, right? So you have the internet deserts of the county, and then you also have the issue of affordability. You have folks that just plain can't afford it, right? And so you also had, when the pandemic hit, thankfully the county had hotspots that they were able to give out as part of a program that they had enrolled in with T-Mobile, but you had other kids that maybe just didn't qualify for it, right? Because they were just right there at that income level. So what did they have to do? They had to go sit outside McDonald's, right? Or sit outside the library and connect to the internet. Even here in this building, right? You can go outside and you can sit on the benches and you can connect to internet. It's kind of inconvenient, right? Especially when we don't have public transportation, we don't have sidewalks, as they said, right? So anyway, so affordability, right? Making sure that the county themselves, us, right, we put together and initiate an education campaign to make residents and businesses aware of the existing programs through internet providers. So it's just like what we do with, WIC and things like that. Very simple, very easy. You can also do that via social media very easily as well. Most people have one of these. Next point. So any education and outreach program that the county goes through, it's really important that I'm sorry, I'm very lost, and this is not what we put together. Anyway, so we need to, as a county, develop an internet plan for Union County. This will help investments in accessibility, affordability, and other activities. This will also ensure that the county themselves, us, will qualify for some grants and some funding to build out the infrastructure as well. We also recommend that the Broadband Internet Committee becomes a permanent advisory committee. We would also, as a permanent committee, go out, ensure that the internet plan for the county is developed, and also identify the various grants that are available to help incentivize these private providers to come in and build out in the areas where it's required.
Thank you. Before we get to questions, would you like to recognize your assistant chairwoman?
That's Helen. It's important for her to understand what happens and what
That's
grown-ups
great.
have to do.
No, I think this is great. This is how you get future leaders.
Exactly.
Uh,
She is on the internet, right? Amazing.
So, do we have any questions? Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, was there any discussion about geographical locations where the county butts up to the edge of, say, Mecklenburg County, and Mecklenburg might have something that's already in place that where we could possibly do a joint venture with them?
Yes.
Was that discussed at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so one of the biggest things and some of the misconceptions, right, are, you can lure folks in, right? Or you can just simply pop in, tie into whatever system. The internet providers in the area, right? So the Charters of the world, the Lumens of the world, Comporium, those folks, right? They're the ones that make the decision. They are the ones that decide where that fiber is laid and where it's not laid. So it doesn't matter, right? You can have, for me personally, like here's a great example. I live on the back of a country road, right? My neighbor closest to me, who's probably, I would say, maybe 700-800 feet. I'm terrible at this, but whatever, right? Where their pole sits and my pole also sits, there was connection. The problem was Spectrum didn't want to come out and run the fiber from that pole to my house. They didn't want to do it because the return on investment, they believed, was not there. There was no incentive for them to come out and do it, no financial incentive for them to come out and do it. That's why, as a committee, we went and we looked at all the different grant programs that were available. We had some excellent help from the new IT director, John. He's fantastic, by the way, good hire. Just really went on this campaign, talked to these various providers to understand, okay, if the county contributes X, Y, and Z funding via ARPA, right? We got a good amount of ARPA funds, and part of those ARPA funds are potentially to be used for this purpose. If we matched even just $1 million to your, $16 million project to build out a portion of the county, that helps them qualify for the grant money from the state, and therefore they will make that investment into the county and help build it out.
Maybe I worded my question wrong. Do we have anybody at the county right now
Yes.
that stepped up to the plate, that's going out like
Yes.
you got two poles,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And interceding for those citizens like that to try to get something going so we know what it is to make it happen.
Yes. That is your IT director.
Pardon?
Your IT director, John. So the new county IT director has been going out, has been talking to the service providers, and he has campaigned and championed along with the broadband committee to come in and convince them to build out in the areas where it's
Could
needed.
I make a recommendation to you?
Please.
Would you put that in this piece
Yes.
before it goes to the Board of Commissioners?
100%.
Okay?
Yes.
And the other about coordinating with near hookups
Yes.
with other counties and things like that. So we get a specific job description, who's doing it now, and then how can we grow on it?
Yeah.
You guys remember the cell tower that we had?
Yeah.
And
But just think about the farmers, though, that buy all this big equipment that
I know.
it's all computerized, and they can't use it.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the broadband out there. They're working probably 3-4 times longer than they have to. And their yields could be a lot more.
Well, it's not only that, right, but they're losing revenue as a result.
Absolutely.
Right? And they get so frustrated, they want to just up and sell and move on, right? Just like we talked about a little while ago. So, yes.
I'm not a farmer, I'm getting frustrated.
Right. It's, I have a friend that wanted to come and purchase a piece of property right off Wolf Pond Road. This happened a month and a half ago. The reason she didn't purchase is because they did not have internet at that house. She works for Cisco, major corporation. Most people know who Cisco is, right? routers, servers, there's probably all sorts of stuff in here. She didn't do it. She's not a resident now, and we lost out on a person that, you know, has a pretty good income that would have contributed to our community, so,
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
sure.
Sounds like we've got some momentum here, so are there any other questions, or do we have a motion?
I think first of all, we ought to have Charlie contact his friend Elon Musk and buy him a satellite. I had a little levity there, Mr.
I've
Chair.
tried the satellite internet connections, that's not too good there, Don. That's not too good. Let's get a hotspot, Don.
Make a motion that we accept it with Vice Chair's recommendations.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor? There you go.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to the board. And this slide was actually already taken care of because we went through all of the recommendations as they came. So I would like to thank you, and if you guys have any additional questions, I would be happy to answer them. Any of the remaining chair people would be happy to answer them, or if you have anything specific towards ordinance language and the procedure, that kind of stuff, Jim King is also here to help with any questions.
Mr.
related to
Harrison.
that. Yes?
Question. What's your name?
Matthew Ray. Yes.
You didn't say it at the beginning, so.
Oh, I'm
we didn't
sorry.
know who you
I
were.
apologize.
Matthew, with that just being decided, will we be able to see a copy or an appended version of that recommendation from, you know, for the language added about the IT director, or what?
Yeah, I don't see why me and Bjorn couldn't send that to the board once we have the amended recommendation
what's
for
going
anything,
to the,
for anything that was added or
commissioners.
subtracted from this before it
Okay.
goes
Okay.
on to the
Okay, thank you, sir.
Board of Commissioners, yes.
I would like to comment before everyone gets out of here. Thank you to all the chairs, all the board members, everyone that took time to work on these committees. I know we didn't necessarily agree with everything, but there's a lot of hard work that went into it, a lot of thought, and I do want to thank everyone on behalf of the board for that.
Yes, I agree, Mr. Chair.
That being said, we move on to the planning staff report.
Do we have anything?
You want to give, tell me there's anything presented.
Nope, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have anything to present from our perspective.
Oh, man, even better.
That's great.
All right, brief comments. Mrs. Duda.
Again, just thank you to the, all the chairpersons, and I, again, I want to also thank you for the experience that I was on one of the committees and all the great work that you all guys have done, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
Just thank you to all the committees.
All right, Mr. Griffin.
I don't mean to be a naysayer or a wet blanket, I'm sorry.
Mr.
I love
Har-
Union County.
Mr. Harrison.
I want to thank Bjorn for not giving us anything.
Vice Chair Fisher.
Echo everybody's comments about thanks to the chairs that made presentations tonight. Matthew, thank you for your leadership bringing this to us. And with that, turn it back to you, sir.
All right, excellent job, Matthew, and thank you, everyone, for all your input today. I really do appreciate it, especially those that don't necessarily agree with me. So, sorry if I push things along too much, and I'm a pain in the butt, but I know that, and so does my wife. So to that end, thank you. Thank you all. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, have a good night.
Matthew, I'm sorry, I didn't see your name.
Introduce myself again.
Is, what's the name on